And I think a lot of people are upset with DeAndre Jordan. Well, I mean, number one, DeAndre Jordan hadn't signed a contract. Number two, DeAndre Jordan decided that he wasn't comfortable with where he was. He didn't like Dallas. And if you're realistic about it, the better odds. Most of these guys want to win a championship. So the better odds for DeAndre Jordan is to be in Los Angeles with the Clippers as opposed to being in Dallas with the Mavericks. Let's be real about that. As a matter of fact, Mark Cuban had already intimated that if they couldn't be successful in free agency, that they would end up potentially tanking, which I know the NBA doesn't like to hear that, but those are the words of Mark Cuban. So unfortunately for Dallas, and I'm not a big Mark Cuban fan at all, and of course he and Chris Broussard, who is an NBA reporter for ESPN, are having a war of words on Twitter. It's find kind of interesting. Broussard suggested that Mark Cuban, the night before was driving around Houston, which is where DeAndre Jordan is from and where he was living, and apparently he didn't even know where DeAndre Jordan lived, according to the reports. And he ended up um, driving around Houston, trying texting DeAndre's agent, his family members, any friends that he may know of DeAndre Jordan, to try to get his address so he can make a ninth hour appeal to DeAndre to stay in Dallas. So apparently he never was able to do that. DeAndre and Twitter was pretty funny. You go out and there are pictures with chairs pushed up against the door, under the doorknob, allegedly not letting DeAndre Jordan leave or anything like that. So it ended up that DeAndre signs and goes back to the Clippers. Now the word was that part of the reason DeAndre was even thinking about going to Dallas was the fact that he wanted to be option. Now, let me just tell you something, DeAndre, and let this be a cautionary tale to all of you young people out there who are potential basketball stars. You know, that's great. You can slam dunk, but that's all you can do, DeAndre. And if you want to be a number one center or the number one option in close games, then here's what you need to be able to do. It's basic fundamental basketball, and that's be able to hit a free throw. This guy was under 30%. An NBA player under 30% is ridiculous. In fact, it's folly. It's a joke. You are never going to be a number one player if you can't hit free throws, and particularly close in the look. Here's the bottom line. You're a great defender, but at the end of the game, when another team has the ball, they have to sit you on the bench, particularly if it's transition, because you're a liability. Because if you get a rebound, you get fouled. You're not going to hit the free throw. So for you to even have the temerity to think that you could be the number one option on any team, someone must have bounced your head up against a basketball a couple of times. And maybe that's what the Clippers did to get you to wake up and re-sign. You're not a number one option on that team, and you never will be because you can't hit free throws. Look, Blake Griffin was a classic example of that when he first came to the league. He was okay in free throws. He couldn't. Here's the thing with Blake Griffin. He was a slam dunk highlight film. That's all he was. Now you look at Blake Griffin, he can hit that 13, 15-foot jump shot. He's not self-check anymore. And he completes his free throws. There's no reason why you're in the gym every day. You're a professional player. All you do is shoot baskets. All you do is play basketball. There is no reason on God's green earth why your butt won't get in a gym and learn how to shoot free throws. And that's any NBA player who struggles at the line because that should not be happening. And you were getting paid millions of dollars. Look, dude, you're getting paid. The Clippers are going to pay you $88 million over what, a 4 or 5 year period. And you can't hit free throws. So you don't need to be a number one option. But at the end of the day, he's a Clipper. A lot of people are upset. A lot of fans are upset. So, oh, he didn't keep his word and all this other mess. And that's all it is a bunch of mess. Okay? Because he didn't have to keep his word. Let me ask you something. When NBA owners and NFL owners are ready to cut a player, do they call that player and say, yo, dog, we love you and you are all right with us, but we're going to cut you? No. A lot of times these players hear about it in the media, on Twitter, a phone call from a person of the person of the person of the person who cut you. That's how it happens. So I don't feel sorry for these owners. I don't feel sorry for Mark Cuban that he got jobbed. I don't care. Good for Mark Cuban. In fact, I'm excited that it happened. I really am, because I don't like Mark Cuban. It's just me. But still, and people say now they need to change the rule. Change what rule? I mean, part of the reason this rule is in effect is because, number one, this is during the time period where they decide what the luxury tax is going to be and what the salary cap is going to be. All of this comes into play, so they have to give them a little leeway, because if you don't want to go out and sign a player for big dollars and then the salary cap is less than what you were expecting, or the luxury taxes that you have to pay is more than what you were expecting, now you're really on a limb because you've signed this big name player. You've got to meet those certain standards as far as the cap and the luxury tax. You might end up having to cut other players. So this moratorium is important during this time period as well. Plus, I thought it was interesting that the league came back and said it's important simply because it gives the players, it takes some of the pressure off of the players. It gives them an opportunity to decide whether or not they want to make that big commitment or not. It's up to the players. So unless you can get him to sign on the dotted line, in fact, you can't. You can do what the Clippers did, go and lock him in until midnight where everybody can sign. So, by the way, update on Wimbledon. Looks like Muguruza is coming back. Muguruza is coming back. Now Serena leads 5-4 in the second set. So we'll see what happens as this continues to flow forward. But no, I'm not upset with DeAndre Jordan at all. It worked for the player, and we're happy it worked for the player, because typically it works for the owners most of the time. Speaking of which, talking about money, how about David West turning down $12 million to go to San Antonio for 1.5 veterans minimum? What? Are you crazy? That's what everybody is saying. Now, I think the number I saw, David West has made over his time in the NBA about $83 million. By the way, there's an interesting piece. I don't know when it's coming on, but check out SportsCenter. 30 for 30 is one of the good things that ESPN does. And there's one that's about to air about broke players. Those of you who want to go pro, and this is not just for professional athletes. I think a lot of people in the music industry as well may want to take heed and watch this particular 30 for 30 about being broke after you've had millions of dollars and how it happens. Okay, so just be aware of that. Let's see here. We're still kind of waiting on Larry Ridley. He hadn't given us a call, so we're gonna trudge forward. Coming up here in about 10 minutes, we're gonna talk a little bit. We're gonna give my Saturday morning rant about DeAndre Johnson and Florida State football. It's a mess. Some of the other things that are going on, by the way, Jason Pierre-Paul, you hear about him? You know, and I said this on my other show, and it's interesting. I don't know what kind of firecrackers he was using. We call them firecrackers. I tell you, from the countries, man, we don't say fireworks down south. We say firecrackers. But I don't know what kind of firecrackers he was using. But it blew his finger off. It mangled his finger so much that they had to amputate it. And of course, that was Pierre-Paul's decision to do that, because he wanted to make the best decision to get back on the field as soon as possible. But man, and of course, it fractured his thumb. Now, I'll be totally honest, and I think most people, particularly young guys, I think if most of us are honest, we'd say that we've had fireworks or firecrackers blown up in our hands. I know I have a couple of times. I've had it actually blown up in my hand, and my poor thumb was hurting for at least a month. And then I've actually, you know how you light them and you try to be cool, and you light it and let it burn a little bit, and then you toss it. Wow, just as I let it go, it blew up. So the concussion from the blast hurt my fingers. So we've had that happen. But for it to be strong enough to blow your finger off, man, that's crazy. So the Giants now, he's waiting to sign a $60 million deal, or a deal that was once on the table. It's not $60 million anymore. The Giants have pulled that off the table. So we'll see how that plays out. But well, that's kind of crazy, to say the least. I also want to make sure that Ken Stabler died this week of colon cancer. Ken Stabler was euphemistically referred to as the Snake, the quarterback of the Oakland Raiders. If you are streaming the video this morning, then you see that I am repping a Stabler jersey, an authentic old school Stabler jersey. Big fan of him, and of course, I am a Raider fan, and was kind of saddened. It certainly takes you back to an era in football, and not just because I am a Raider fan, but when you go back and you look at football, where it began to take its hold. Because growing up, believe it or not, baseball was king. You look forward to that game of the week, and we followed baseball, of course. Football was great; people watched it, but football wasn't as dominant as we thought it was, as people think it was today. It wasn't. It was baseball. Basketball had NBA hadn't even gotten its footing, and hockey was like soccer is. So when you look back, when football really took its hold on the nation, you go back, you look at the Steelers, you look at the Cowboys, you look at the Dolphins, and you look at the Oakland Raiders. Those were the teams back then. And Kenny Stabler winning the 77 Super Bowl with the Raiders over the Philadelphia 76ers, and my good friend Dennis Harrison. In fact, we're going to get Dennis on the air. I tried to get him this week, but Dennis lives in Nashville, so we're going to get him on the air and talk a little bit about his career with Philadelphia 76ers. But during that era, this was football at its finest. Those classic games with the Steelers, and let me not forget Dan Fouts and the San Diego Chargers. Those classic games with the Chargers. I mean, this was Raider football at its finest. Phil Filippiano, Ken Stabler, Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell. Wow. Ted Hendricks, Otis Sistra, Jack Tatum, George Atkinson. Yeah, them were my boys. I'm going to tell you. They were bad as well. So Ken Stabler passes away. Don't know really why this guy is not in the NFL Hall of Fame. I'm sure the momentum, and of course, a lot of people say because he didn't really treat the media well. Well, kiss it, media. This guy should be in the Hall of Fame because he helped usher in the NFL to what it is today, along with Bradshaw, along with Staubach, along with Greasy, all of those great name quarterbacks. Ken Stabler should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they just put Ray Guy in the Hall of Fame, folks. All right. Ray Guy at one point, he was the definition of what a kicker should be. I'm talking about Ray Guy. That just shows you the difference in what football was as opposed to what it is now. Everything that people do, coffin, they don't even do coffin corner anymore. Ray, John Madden said he used Ray Guy as a weapon. That he didn't worry about third and tens and things of that nature. Because if he didn't make it, he knew Ray Guy could get him out of a jam and kick. He was another defender. And they just put Ray Guy into the Hall of Fame. It just shows you how much stuff. But anyway, we're going to go out and take another break. Coming back, we're going to get into my Saturday morning rant about DeAndre Johnson. I hope you'll stick and stay. I think you'll like it. You may not. You may think I'm a cad, but that's okay. That's what America's for. First Amendment. We're back in a moment. All right now. Party over here ain't over there. Yeah, I used to be an old school partier. We used to kick back like a fatty rat. Had some fun times down at SAU down in Magnolia back in my college days. And of course, who can forget the Diplomat right down on 9th Street? Well, if you didn't dip in Little Rock, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, I've been all over the country during that time period. The Dip was one of the best clubs in America, and PJ's, of course, PJ's. It wasn't a rival to many clubs around the country. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. But anyway, you're listening to the Weekly Sports Magazine. I am Dynamic David Coleman. I'm here every Saturday morning from 9 to 10, coming up from 8 to 10, beginning August 1st. Hope you're a stick and stay for that. Got a lot of great things for you coming up. We're going to be talking about sports. Be sure to pass the word and tell your friends. We talk about sports from all perspectives. And of course, we don't shy away from any of the controversial things as well, as you probably heard some of my guests already. But anyway, sorry we couldn't get Larry Ridley. We'll try to get him on next week as well, and some other guest stuff. But I want to go ahead and start getting into my Saturday morning rant about DeAndre Jordan. And let me be clear, and of course, if you don't want to hear about domestic violence, then you might want to change the channel. All right. And I typically don't tell people to change channels, but this can be uncomfortable. People don't like to talk about domestic violence, but it happens all the time. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And certainly Florida State is hypersensitive about domestic violence, and particularly the transgressions that are committed by their players. And of course, we've heard a lot about it over the last couple of years, and favoritism by the Florida State Police Department and things of that nature, or the police department in that area, Tallahassee Police Department, kind of covering up and doing things for Florida State. But if you have not had an opportunity, please go out and look at the video that was released from I guess it was the Tallahassee Police Department about DeAndre Jordan in a bar and what occurs. And I am going to paraphrase it. And before we get in there, just quickly, Serena is now the Wimbledon champion. She wins 6-4, 6-4 over Gabina Muguruza. Good for her, on the way to that Grand Slam, that calendar Grand Slam. But as I was saying, the police department released the video, and this apparently took place back on June 24th, somewhere in there, late June, somewhere in there, of star quarterback, Mr. Florida Football, at a bar late night, going in and apparently getting into something with a young co-ed. Now, what happens on the video is what we can tell is that he walks up to the bar. The young lady looks at him. She tries to swing at him and stuff like that. He holds her arm and she swings again, and then he swings and he connects her with it. And apparently he, hits her in the face, and she had some cuts. The blow didn't look that vicious or that powerful on video, but hey, you never know what you see on video. What we don't see is what's taking place waist down. We see headshot, but we don't see what's taking waist down. After Florida State, Jimbo Fisher and all of those saw the video, the president of Florida State, they decided that was enough evidence to kick DeAndre Johnson off the team and out of school. Okay. Yeah, and certainly Florida State is hypersensitive about some of the things that's been going on last year and in the past. So they're trying to be proactive. Yeah, well, at this point, and then of course the question is, why wasn't the young lady disciplined as well? Because after all, if you're going to use the video as evidence against DeAndre Johnson, should you not then use that same video as evidence against that young lady who looked like she initiated the confrontation? I would say yes. Now, I know you domestic violence folks out there rolling your eyes and upset, well, he shouldn't have hit a woman. Well, I'm going to say she shouldn't have hit him or attempted to hit him. Because see, here's the problem I have with a lot of domestic violence people. All right. Because, and let me be clear, I am against domestic violence. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. There is no reason why any man should think that he can control a woman, whether it's physically, financially, or psychologically. To me, I have no conversation for those men. And fortunately for me, I don't know any men who do that. Thank goodness. The people that I call my friends and my inner circle are cool guys. So I like that. But the fact of the matter that this young lady attempted to slug him, should he not have been able to defend himself? And according to reports from his lawyer states that the young lady not only attempted to slug him, she called him a racial slur. Now certainly that's no reason to go and hit someone, but she attempted what we didn't see below that headshot was she had already attempted to try to knee him in the groin. Now we don't know what took place, but we can only go by what he said and what the video shows. Now, I have not seen any statements from her as of yet. But here's my concern is that what we're teaching and what we're talking about when you talk about domestic violence is to suggest that it is only men who commit domestic violence. Well, it is only men who get reported committing domestic violence. But if you go out and you look at some of the statistics, there are a lot of women who commit domestic violence against their male counterparts. We see it all the time. There's a video, an interesting video that's been floating around Facebook for some time right now of a classroom setting where this young lady is going after this guy, and this guy's literally begging her to stop, leave him alone, get away from me, leave me alone. She continues coming after him, and she finally slaps him. The guy gets angry, he picks it up and body slams. Was he right? Was he pushed into a corner? See, I'm not trying to determine what was right or wrong. I'm just trying to determine what led up to these things. And if there's a young lady out there, and if you're hearing my voice, young lady, because there are, just like there are violent men, there are violent women. If you're hearing my voice right now, you have no business putting your hands on a man no more than he has any business putting his hands on you. And unfortunately, when that occurs, all bets are off. We hear of women all the time who have suffered under domestic violence for so long, they defend themselves, and unfortunately, sometimes the spouse ends up dead. And people say, "Oh, she had put up with this." Sometimes you get pushed in the corner. I'm just simply saying, as we talk about domestic violence going forward, we need to be saying that no one should be putting their hands on anyone, not just men hitting women, but women hitting men. Because whether you want to agree with what I'm saying or not, it happens quite often. And men simply don't report it because they are looked at as weak, a punk. So men deal with it in shame a lot of times. I know a whole lot of sisters who verbally abuse their men. I'm just saying. And as far as Florida State is concerned, I think Florida State abandoned this young man. Just 2 years ago, you went into his mama's house and you sat on his mama's couch. You probably drank some coffee. You probably ate a sandwich or some food and told his mama that you were going to take care of him. You told his mama that you were going to make sure he gets an education. And his mama agreed, at least that's the way it usually happens, that she would send her baby to Florida State. So when he gets in a tight, do you wait till the evidence is in, or do you just simply look at what your reaction or what public relations would be, and you throw this kid out with the bathwater? You lied to his mother. You lied to his relatives. Now, look, I'm not taking any responsibility off of DeAndre Johnson, because probably at 19 years old, he probably shouldn't have been out there at that club. What they say, there's nothing out good that happens after 11:30. Well, I kind of disagree with that, but that's another story. But I'm simply saying what Florida State should have done, regardless of all the mess that has went on with James Winston in the past and all these other players. At some point, you have to start giving your players the benefit of the doubt. There are two sides to every story. Now, that video certainly didn't look good, But it wasn't like he walked up and slugged that young lady. She slugged or attempted to slug him first. It didn't look good, but at least you should say, hey, look, it doesn't look good. We're going to hold judgment. I went and I made a commitment to this young man and his family. And if he made the wrong decision, then we will discipline him as such. But just to automatically throw him off that football team without giving him his due process, I think Florida State dropped the ball. And if I'm an athlete, and if I'm a parent of an athlete, I would certainly look at this in the future and see what's going on when it comes to Florida State and things that happens with my players on team. And this should go for any coach out there that's recruiting. Yeah, look, let's be realistic. There are some bad apples that get on college campuses. All right. There are a lot of these guys don't belong on college campuses. I'm not saying this is DeAndre Johnson, but there are a lot of guys that don't belong on college campuses. But I'm just simply saying everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. And certainly DeAndre Johnson, at minimum, his school should have been willing to say, okay, look, dude, we're going to sit you down. No, you can't come to the facility until this is resolved. Once it's resolved, we'll make a decision on what's going to happen, whether or not you can be part of this school or that we're going to kick you off. That's how that should have been handled. Now, 2 weeks from now, I could be eating my words. It could be that nothing happened. DeAndre Johnson initiated all of it, what we didn't see on video, all that other stuff. But according to his attorney, this young lady initiated it. Called him an N-word, tried to knee him in the groin. Was he not? And look, I'm going to tell you this, and I know when you go out to self-defense class as ladies, the first thing they tell you is kick a guy in the groin. That's for self-defense. All right? But if you get in a little argument or something like that and you kick a guy in the groin or attempt to, I'm going to be honest with you, you're asking for it. Not saying it's right, but you have to use some judgment as well. And if that young lady attempted to kick DeAndre Johnson in the groin prior to that incident we saw on film, I'd be a little ticked too. And then let's be realistic. There was probably some ignorant oil being played out in there as well. Okay? So, again, probably didn't need to be at a bar at 19. But on the other hand, I think Florida State dropped the ball on just throwing this guy out with the bathwater. He could end up being a terrible person. But at least have the evidence. Don't allow public opinion and special interest groups to drive what's right. That's the problem we have in this country right now. Everybody get up in arms about certain things, then don't really have any facts to back it up, and then lives are ruined. He's going to take enough heat already because of the video. But what happens if it's proven that that young lady started it all? You've thrown this guy out of school. And I'm going to tell you, athletes, they look at this. Loyalty is the number one thing they look at what I'm trying to think Adrian Peterson. Even though we saw those ugly pictures of the sons, the welts on his son's back, and he admitted that he did it. But one thing Adrian Peterson, while he and Minnesota got into it once they cleared him to come back, first thing he said, y'all weren't loyal to me. And I don't think Adrian Peterson was saying, defend me even in my bad. At least let this play out and let's see where it goes. And then discipline me. Just saying. We just need to be careful when we start jumping the gun on things of this nature. We just really do. So anyway, so that's my rant for the morning. It went a little bit longer than what I was expecting, but I'm real passionate about this because I think we have a problem with domestic violence. But I think we need to address domestic violence in its totality. This mantra out here that men are only the ones that commit domestic violence, there's much, much more data out there to prove that that's a lie. Hate to bring this up, but look at a lesbian relationship. Lesbian relationships are reported to have more domestic violence than anyone else, or they're close to men-women relationships. Those are two women. So if men have the propensity to only be domestic violators, why is it that lesbian relationships have them? That's why you have to be careful when you make those wild-eyed assumptions. And that's what many of the domestic violence people have done. Because you can be a domestic violator, physical abuse certainly, mental abuse certainly, psychological abuse certainly. Women are good with that. I'm just trying to keep it real with you. All right. Okay, so that's the show for this morning. Really appreciate it. Just want to remind you, coming up at let's see, about August 1st. Coming up August 1st, we will be going for 2 hours. We're going to have big fun and all those things. We're going to have a lot of guests, things of that nature. Football season's right around the corner, so make sure you stick and stay and don't go away from that. So we got to get out of here. It's been fun listening to you. Don't forget, every Saturday morning right here on Joynet Radio, we're talking sports. And I guess this song is appropriate as we go out the door to talk a little bit about, we need to look at ourselves and look in the mirror and see how we can initiate some change. I'm changing every day, and you should be too. If you're not changing, you might as well be dead. Got to get out of here. Thanks for listening. I'm Dynamic Dave. We'll see you on the other side.